Hey guys, it's Harrison along with Josh, and welcome to the Awkward Sports Podcast. We got a lot going on. First thing to mention in the NBA, two teams in the conference final, East and West, up 3-0. The Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference, and our focus, the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference.
Hey Harrison, I got a question for you. Is the
What is it?
NBA still fixed? Is it still fixed, as everyone must say?
Well, look, if it's in the scripts, can we really say it's unscripted?
Let me
I'm
tell
not
you,
sure how little that actually made sense. As it's just so dumb of a statement, I can follow it up with a dumb answer.
it's so crazy because it's like, oh, the league, they have an agenda. Well, they're going to lose a lot of money because the Celtics and the Lakers aren't in the finals. But
I'd
on
be
the
more
flip
likely to
side,
say it's rigged if there is a Lakers Celtics finals.
right. But on the flip side of that, the two teams that look to be on the doorstep of making the finals, the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat, both well deserved. Uh, Denver has been doing it all year long. They have been dominant from the get go, being the one seed in the tough Western Conference that they are. And of course, the Miami Heat flying under the radar most of the regular season, being fourth to last in the NBA in 3-point shooting. This game has evolved into a shooter's game. It was basically driven by Steph Curry, and the game has kind of changed. Miami's bringing it back old school style, and they're doing it with an old school type player in Jimmy Butler. He's got this killer instinct to him. He just lays it all out there on the line in every single game. Kind of reminds you of Michael Jordan and Kobe when it comes to just that relentless effort that he gives you on a nightly basis. As the Celtics have seen throughout this conference final series, up close and personal. Grant Williams, he started talking trash to Jimmy Butler, and then the Celtics fell apart. Jimmy Butler took over in the fourth quarter, and Miami took a commanding 2-0 lead, and then went on to game three and rolled Boston. And it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, like you look at the way this team is constructed, nobody saw this team coming. They lost their first play-in game. They were in danger of missing the playoffs altogether. And then after losing to the Hawks to beat the Chicago Bulls, to get into the playoffs and upset who many thought were the favorites out of the East, the Milwaukee Bucks, have now proven that it's not a fluke. They are now one win away from the NBA Finals. And Harrison, it's just one of those things where you look at this team, and again, they don't shoot the ball particularly well. But I almost like to compare this team to one of your big time teams that you study very up close and personal, the Tampa Bay Rays.
Really?
And it's one of those things where you look at the roster makeup of the Miami Heat. And yes, on paper, they still have some names like Bam Adebayo and Kyle Lowry, and of course, Jimmy Butler. And then bubble heroes like Tyler Harrow and, of course, Duncan Robinson. But this team has really been more headlined by Jimmy Butler leading a group of just driven competitors to the brink of the NBA Finals. Guys by the names of Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent. Who are these people? I have no idea who these people are, but apparently throughout these past few playoff series, they have taken the league by storm. I think it was Martin who had 29 last night. It was absolutely absurd. And it's just kind of what the Heat culture has pretty much been. I don't know where these scouts are finding these players. They're picking these guys up, signing them to two-way contracts, 10-day prove-it deals. These guys are working. Max Strus being another one of those guys a couple seasons ago. And these guys just play like every game is their last. And if they don't play well, they're going to be replaced. And in the modern NBA, it's always been about you need to have a 3-point shooting team and you need to build it around star power. You need to have names that sell tickets and players that play well on a nightly basis. And you're only going to win if you have stars. I have come on this podcast a number of times preaching that you got to have stars to win in this league. Most recently, the last one we were on, as a coach, you got to have players. Well, maybe you don't have to have all the superstar players, as Miami is showing us this year, being an 8 seed, 1 win away, Jimmy Butler obviously being that star. But that culture is really driven from the top down, from Pat Riley to Udonis Haslem, who's been there forever, and of course Coach Eric Spoelstra. And it's just this legacy of like you don't take days off, you work your tail off all the way through until you get to the finish line. And that's something that the Miami Heat have been doing.
Okay. I get some of the places that you're coming from. Yeah, you can argue like with the Rays. Some people are wondering like, who is Taylor Walls? Who is Luke Raley? Where did they get Drew Rasmussen from? And yeah, the Miami Heat have a couple guys like that on a surprising playoff run, which I've said on this podcast before, I don't think it's that surprising. The Rays don't, like you mentioned, the Heat do have some names. And that is kind of a crucial big reason that I just disagree. And I know you're going with for most part, you got to hit certain key aspects to do what to get that comparison for the Rays. Because despite like a Randy or Rosarena or a Wander Franco, none of them are a Jimmy Butler. There's no single guy on the Rays who's really like the guy. I mean, like, yeah, is Randy probably the closest one to it? Yeah. Is Shane McClanahan probably one of the closest to it? Perhaps. But the Heat are still doing this with the name power. It's not fully it's not just that full Moneyball-esque way of playing sports.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I would say obviously when you look at the baseball side of things, right? Tampa Bay's been doing it for a much longer period of time. Miami built their foundation on winning championships around star players. You look at the 05-06 team with Dwayne Wade being the rising star that he was, and then they cobbled together a roster of experienced veterans that were inevitably going to end up in the Hall of Fame, like Shaquille O'Neal and Gary Payton and Antoine Walker, and the list goes on. And then you go to the early 2010s when you add LeBron James and Chris Bosh to the roster, and those teams were stacked with star power. The way I see it differently this time for this Heat team is I do get your point. They may not have the Rays, may not have the standalone guy as opposed to like Miami does with a Jimmy Butler. But Shane McClanahan's in the running for Cy Young. Butler wasn't in the running for MVP, as great as he is, because of how poorly they did in the regular season. Now, he does turn it up when it comes to the playoffs, and that's what makes him so great. And I think it's going to make them tough to stop. But I do get your point about the one standalone guy. The Rays do have a couple that you could argue are the guy to the roster, whereas we do know in Miami for the Heat, it is Jimmy Butler's team, even though they have put together some other pieces around him that may not be as popular. I do think, to your point, they are not quite the Rays, but I think it's as close as you're going to get from a basketball perspective. When you look at Boston, on paper, Boston is just stacked. Like, if you look on paper, Boston should win this series in 4 games. They have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. I mean, they have answers for almost everybody on that roster if you look at it on paper. Even Robert Williams is a guy that you could be switching on Jimmy Butler. He's more of a physical big that can close out on shooters pretty well. But Miami has really run this team out of the gym. And the Celtics just made the finals last season. Really blows my mind to see how the Miami Heat have kind of answered that call since the last time they did so was in the bubble. But then again, this has been kind of a bubble resurgence year. Denver is a win away from the NBA Finals as well. They made it to the conference finals last time around when it was in the bubble. And obviously, the Miami Heat did make it that far, and they're looking to do that again. And I do think, even though that the NBA is going to lose out on a Lakers-Celtics finals, I don't think they're going to lose out on an exciting series. They're going to lose out on the brand power and the history behind it. But they're going to get, I think, a series that's going to go 7 games. Denver has the star power to do it. Jamal Murray is shooting better than anybody in the league right now. And as long as he continues to do that, Denver's going to be very tough to stop. And then Miami, you know what you're going to get from them every night. They're going to leave it all out on the floor. And I think that series is going to go 7 games.
Yeah. And I just want to get back to the Heat for a second because we keep talking about how like they barely got in. The Celtics are clearly the favorites. Well, first of all, they should be. But we forget one big thing about this Heat team is that like they are better than any typical 8th seed. Like if there wasn't for some slumps here and there, maybe some health on the team, this is probably a 5th seed instead. And if you're in the 8th seed spot and you're better than that usual position and you got a key guy, it really isn't that crazy to get past a team you have seen before and then go on a run because this team is built for that. Let me bring in a different Tampa Bay comparison that I think works better, and that's the Lightning. They got their core guys. They have developed this supporting cast of people that we really don't know who they are. Who's Barclay Goodrow they just acquired? Who's Brandon Hagel? All these guys who just show up and become a spectacular supporting cast. And then even though they're never like, apart from like one year where they were the President's Trophy winner, sometimes they go towards those slumps towards the end of the year. They're not as, they don't get home ice because of it. They still pull through because they have their it guys, whether it's Stammer, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, and then they just absolutely go off and go on a run. Next thing you know, 2 Stanley Cups in the 3rd straight finals appearance. That's what I think the Heats are way closer to, just based on what you're describing.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say this, and I also will branch off on this on the roster that the Miami Heat have constructed. It's also a credit to just the way the league is kind of shaped today. The depth is ridiculous. I mean, we're looking back, you can go back like not even a full 2 decades and see players that were on finals rosters that you're thinking like, would they even make the league today with just how much talent there is? Like we saw like the Cleveland Cavaliers. What other people mentioned LeBron's 06, 07 Cavs. I mean, they had the likes like Delonte West on that team. And it's like, you look at some of these players now that are in the G League, you're like, these guys, why aren't they on NBA rosters? But it really is a testament to the depth of the NBA as a whole. There's just so much more talent in the league today. It's pretty remarkable when you see that on paper. Miami is showing that it can be done. And yeah, to your point, not a typical 8 seed. I think part of that also goes to the way the league has kind of set themselves up over the past few years, the lottery odds changing, the playoff format changing. They really want to discourage tanking in the NBA. I'm not so sure it's the best thing for the league because you have a lot of teams sort of pacing themselves into the playoffs. But at the same time, this year's playoffs have been incredibly exciting. Some might say one of the best playoff years we've had in a couple of years or so, 3 to 4 years tops. And it's like, at what cost does that come to the regular season that has basically been rendered meaningless by these rule changes? You look at this Miami team, they aren't a regular 8 seed. I mean, they kind of crawled in there at the end, but like you said, they had a lot of great players. The Lakers weren't really your typical 7 seed. The Warriors weren't typical 6 seed. And it's like a lot of teams look at the mindset of, are we going to really wear our team down, run out of gas by the playoffs and win 60 games? There was no team that touched 60 wins this year. And I think that's part of kind of teams kind of looking at the regular season as we don't need to win all these games. We just need to get to the playoffs, stay healthy, and then put it together. And that's kind of what the league's becoming now, where seeding doesn't really matter too much because it's not about divisions. It's just the best teams in your conference. And if you're one of the 10 best teams in your conference out of the 16 teams per, you're going to get a shot at getting in the playoffs and going for the championship.
Yeah, exactly. And the league's going to continue to change. I know that mid-season tournaments coming in, obviously adding the play-in de-emphasized the regular season quite a bit just in existing. It went from being, you're in 9th place fighting to get into the playoffs at all. But now being in ninth place means, for all intents and purposes, you're in a playoff spot when you're going into the play-in. Because if you make it out of it, you're going to the playoffs. You're not eliminated during the first 82 games of play. It'll be interesting to see how things wrap up. Obviously, the conference finals are not over, and we still have the finals coming up, and we'll see how that works. Anyway, moving on to another sport, the National Hockey League. It's been a wild few days for the league. Referendums in cities called Tempe and a team called the Arizona Coyotes. I don't know what the hell is going on, man. They look like everything's in jeopardy. You got the governor of Connecticut's calling to ask about bringing them to Hartford. Salt Lake City has reached out. And then they just go completely rogue on Twitter. You're pulling out stadium plans and then you're rickrolling an entire fan base. What on earth is going on? I know they say they're playing at Mullet Arena next year. They are committed to playing in an arena that junior hockey leagues would complain is too small. It's we're gonna get into some potential relocation spots in a bit, but at what point can you look at this and say this is just too insane? It just has to stop.
I mean, personally, for the Arizona Coyotes, if they end up relocating, or if they don't, I just want to see them keep the logo that they have. I think it's cool. I hope they keep the name.
It depends where they go.
I saw like a mock-up on Twitter. I heard like a Houston mock-up, and they basically took the logo that they already had and changed the colors. And I'm like, that could kind of work. I could kind of see it, but it's like, we'll see what ends up happening over there with them. Obviously, Arizona hockey, I don't know how much that really mixes the desert and the ice, but like, then again, people watch
Vegas says it does.
In Vegas, they do, and down in Florida, they do, and that's another team down in South Florida that's really is an 8 seed, making waves down there, the Panthers. But yeah, back to the Coyotes. It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing unfolds, and I know they've been searching here for a couple of seasons now.
Yes, and we'll see where they move. I just want to throw a couple cities at you. One of them, I wrote these notes down before this latest one came up with Connecticut. So we'll get to that one last. First thoughts are on Kansas City. There's an arena there. The T-Mobile Center has been open since 2007, can hold over 17,000 people. Hosts the Big 12 men's basketball tournaments. One of the pros is that the arena is there. It's a market with potential. However, the Kansas City scouts were a thing in the 70s and they failed. Times have changed, but a lot of times that precedent doesn't help, even if the product was really, really bad at the time. And even then, if they averaged 8,000 fans, that's more than the Coyotes are getting right now. Not saying that would be good, but you get my points. Kansas City.
Kansas City. I mean, it's going to go one of two ways, right? Let's say hypothetically they land that franchise. Is that town hungry for a new sports team, or are they right now just very, very content with the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are running the show and they just want more and more football? And I get they have the Royals for baseball, but it's one of those things where it's like, I know they love their football. Will they welcome in a new sport? Or like, are they hungry for a new sport?
Mahomes is certainly welcoming them in. He already tweeted about it.
Who?
Patrick Mahomes.
Mahomes, yeah, that would be. Yeah,
he's the one who said, like, he's basically had a tweet said, "Hey, come on over."
If Mahomes is leading the charge, I bet they'll start putting fans in seats, especially if Mahomes is driving that train. Because we know they put fans in seats for football games. They have one of the loudest environments there. So just from that alone, we know there are sports fans in that city. Would they be accepting of a hockey team, especially with how well teams, obviously this wouldn't be an expansion team, it'd be a relocation, but how well, new teams and new cities have really succeeded right off the bat. Maybe a fresh start for Arizona and Kansas City might do them a whole lot of good.
Yeah. One, you at least get the advantage of hockey being novel over there, and it's only their third sport. They haven't had the NBA since they went to Sacramento way back when. It would be definitely a city guy give a chance. Second option, Houston, the Toyota Center, the home of the Rockets, holds 17,800 people. There used to be a WHA team that was in Houston, the Arrows. Obviously, the Houston Coyotes is definitely still an option, especially when you're still like sort of near the deserts. There's also an AHL team in Houston for years. That lasted a decade before they left. That's also the AHL. WHA is not always considered the same as the NHL, even though nowadays we do when we look back at it. Houston, thoughts? Still central time zone, all of that. Central division, but this time also in the central time zone.
Right. Houston. So obviously staying in that time zone with Kansas City. But again, it's kind of the flip side of what I was talking about Kansas City. Now, obviously Houston, obviously baseball, it's been kind of the thing over there with how dominant they've been over the past few years. The Texans are in rebuilding mode, and so are the Rockets. And maybe that town would be open to it because maybe they just want to see a team come in that might actually bring them wins. Because right now that city just wants to see teams win. And if the Coyotes went over there and started off the bat winning games, I think they could take a good market of those fans and, pack that stadium, pack the Toyota Center where the Rockets do play right now, because the Rockets don't seem to be going up anywhere anytime soon, considering how the draft lottery went for them. So, yeah, maybe they would be excited for a hockey team. Again, that's another possibility, and I think it's the opposite of what you're looking at when it comes to Kansas City.
Yeah, and let's not forget the Houston Astros are good regardless of that tarnished history they got going there. So yeah, it would definitely be nice to have someone to root for and potentially give your have your spirits up in the winter time, because there's two seasons, baseball and winter, and the Coyotes could potentially fill that gap. We're going to quickly jump to north of the border, two Eastern Canadian cities. We're kind of doing them at the same time. They're the absolutely not happening too, but because the Coyotes have had connections, whether in rumors or actuality, we got Quebec City with the Videotron Center hosting over 18,000 people. The Quebec Ramparts always have been doing well playing there, even though they're junior hockey, whether you want to argue cheap tickets or just the fact that some team that's in their city, it's still pretty good. There's no doubt there would be supports. And the same thing would go with the city of Hamilton in Ontario. Someone tried to move the Coyotes there in like 2013. The league was not having it. They won't have it again for Hamilton, and they do not want Quebec City.
So yeah, I mean, obviously to your point, I think you hit on it pretty good. It's Canada. I mean, people are going to come out and support hockey up there. They just do. It's their life up there. They love it. My question would be, would they keep the Coyotes name if they went up there? Would they go something else? Because Coyotes, Canada, I don't know.
The Nordiques. They would just be the Nordiques.
Well, Quebec, yes. The Quebec would be the Nordiques, but I mean like Hamilton.
Oh no, they would probably. There's some historic, like the Hamilton Bulldogs is a potential name. You could always do like the Tigers, which is similar to the Tiger Cats of the CFL. I believe that was an older Hamilton team, but I'm not entirely sure. But there's like historic name options they could pull from. I just don't think I think if they don't go to like a Kansas City or a Houston, I don't believe they would keep the Coyotes name.
Right. And obviously, as far as the Nordiques, you touched on with Quebec, would they be able to get those rights back? Because don't the Colorado Avalanche still hold those rights for that name? Because I've seen throwback stuff from time to time.
They would probably be able to work it out. The Jets were Winnipeg was able to get the Jets name, even though that does belong to the Coyotes. It's not the same look, obviously, but sometimes it's typically done on purpose as well. Like the Nationals in baseball could have, in theory, have been the Senators, but they chose not to. But they still made sure they got that old Senators, Walgreens, Curly Q W logo. Like these are things that can totally happen if someone's able to just pick up the phone and say, hey, let's work it out.
Yeah, and on that note, and this is a little off topic, but also on it, I want the Tennessee Titans to give Houston a call and apologize and hand over the Oilers name this instant. So I just
Oh,
needed to
I'm
make
fully in agreement with you on that. Some names just have to go back to their original cities.
let it happen. Make everybody happy. This is from two completely unbiased people that live in Florida.
Absolutely.
Tennessee, give Houston their name back.
Speaking of moving names around, we mentioned the Jets got their name back. Perhaps the Coyotes might move over to a city in Georgia and call up saying, hey, we'll give you the Coyotes and the Jets history, the old Jets history, in exchange for that Atlanta Thrashers history. Just pass that over, become the Atlanta Thrashers and all of that.
I think we could just fix I think we could just fix every league. I think we could. I think we just fix it as far as
Yeah, I
name.
don't know. I'm surprised they haven't asked us for our opinions at it.
I know.
They're
Ridiculous. I
pretty
mean, we
good
can,
ideas.
I know there's so many great names at our disposal. We can make it work.
Yeah, and obviously, let's get through the basic stuff. Oh yeah, checks notes. Atlanta's failed twice. Checks notes again. They would have to go back to the same building they were in before, which even though it's remodeled, that's always kind of weird to think. Like they left because of that building, and now they're going back to it. Checks notes again. There's a proposal coming that someone wants to put out there. It'd be like a $2 billion development in Atlanta, and it would include a hockey arena. Yeah, Atlanta's come up with the Houston expansion talks, like not talks, like little rumors that bounced around a couple of months ago. I'd love to see it. It's also not going to happen. It's why it's on the same page of notes as Quebec City and Hamilton. Anyway, let's go through just a rapid fire of some recent ones that have popped up recently. Your thoughts in Salt Lake City?
No. No, 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 no.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Moving on, Milwaukee.
Yeah, yes, heck yeah, why not? I mean, I feel like I'm surprised Wisconsin still doesn't have a hockey team. I think they'd support it. The idea that they support the Blackhawks to me is complete BS. Bears Packers is a big rivalry. Give me a team in Wisconsin, they would be all out for it.
I honestly would agree with that. Milwaukee's one of those cities that just sounds like it should have hockey that's not the Wisconsin Badgers.
Blows my mind.
Last but not least, because of the potential talks that are coming, the governor of Connecticut wants to talk to Gary Bettman soon. Your thoughts on the return of the Hartford Whalers?
Yep, bring back the Whalers, baby. It's another one I'm all 100% behind. No for Salt Lake. Yes for Milwaukee. Yes for the Hartford Whalers. We can make this thing happen. Let's make it happen.
If there's supposed to be a move, in theory, your prediction, when will we find out by?
Oh, good gracious. That's a good question. I don't know the history of how long these timelines work in the National Hockey League. I know in other leagues it can vary depending on the team. So your guess is probably better than mine. I have no clue how fast this thing's gonna move.
Well, it could be within a week because that's how the Thrashers got moves. Within days, they were off the Winnipeg. However, I would just say before the draft, so a couple of weeks from now, they have to decide where are they going to move or not, because it could affect how draft picks feel. We just saw Logan Cooley say he's going to stay in college another year, and the reasoning was the failed Tempe votes.
Wow.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of the Awkward Sports Podcast. I'm Harrison. That's Josh. We thank you again for listening. I know we've been gone for a few days longer than we typically are, but we're going to be back in the normal swing of things immediately. So we'll see you next time. What are we going to talk about next time? Josh, do you know what we talk about?
The Jordan shoulder shrug, baby. It's always the go-to.
Exactly. But we will know by the time there's an episode coming out. And when we are here, we will see you next time.